10. Dead flies, oh, this is a great way to start off. Dead flies make a perfumer's oil stink. So a little foolishness is weightier than wisdom and honor. For a wise man's heart directs him towards the right, but a foolish man's heart directs him toward the left. Even when the fool walks along the road, his sense is lacking, and he demonstrates to everyone that he is a fool. If the ruler's temper rises against you, do not abandon your position, because composure allies great offense. There is an evil I have seen under the sun, like an arrow which goes forth from the ruler. Folly is set in many exalted places, while rich men sit in humble places. I have seen slaves riding on horses, and princes walking like slaves upon the land. He who digs his pit may fall into it, and a serpent may bite him who breaks through a wall. He who quarries stones may be hurt by those same stones, and he who splits logs may also be endangered by them. If the axe is dull and he does not sharpen its edge, then he must exert all the more strength. For wisdom has the advantage of creating success. If the serpent bites before being charmed, there is no profit for the charmer. Words from the mouth of a wise man are always gracious, while the lips of a fool will consume him. The beginning of his talking is folly, and the end of it is wicked madness. Yet the fool continues to multiply his words. No man knows what will happen, and who can tell him what will come after? The toil of a fool will so weary him that he does not even know how to go to the city. Woe to you, O land, whose king is a lad and whose princes feast in the morning. Blessed are you, O land, whose kings is nobility and whose princes eat at the appropriate time, for strength and not drunkenness. Through indolence, the rafters sag, and the slackness the house leaks. Men prepare a meal for enjoyment, and wine makes life merry, and money is the answer for everything. Furthermore, in your bedchamber do not curse a king, and in your sleeping rooms do not curse the rich man. For a bird of heaven will carry the sound, and the winged creature will make the matter known to all. What do you think?
Well, I think God hears you as much as a bird carrying you.
Well, you got to remember it's poetry.
Yes.
So don't overthink it.
Not precise.
Well, you know, there's an old poem, which is actually quite a good one. I just can't remember what it is. But it says, that which you let live in your heart will eventually show on your face. And I think that's kind of where Solomon's going with this, is who you are will become evident sooner or later. You can't hide the evil or the anger or the hatred for very long before it pops out. And it may come out in disguised forms, but it will come out. I mean, when you're mad, you're mad. Tim, you know when Cougar Ranch is mad? Probably. Well, knowing her, she'll probably tell you. But the point is you can't hide it for long. Carol knows when I'm upset, and I know when she's upset. And the only thing you don't want to do is ask her, what's wrong? No, you just let it pass, and you run and dig a hole and hide in it for 3 or 4 weeks. But as a man's heart is, so goes the man, so to speak. And if it's anger or negative, he will be anger or negative. If he's positive and lively, that doesn't mean he won't have bad days. That doesn't mean he won't have things go wrong. That doesn't mean he won't be disappointed when he wanted something and didn't get it, or, tried to get a new job and didn't get it. That just means that it won't dictate to him how he feels about his existence. He's going to, be an even-keeled kind of guy. You get hurt for a little while and you get over it. And you walk on. And, one day yesterday, kind of like Jimmy Buffett says, yesterday's over my shoulder. I won't be looking back for too long because there's too much to see waiting in front of me. And I know that I'll never steer wrong. And he's right, to look back and say, well, this went bad, and this went bad, and this went bad, and this went bad. And therefore, because of all this, I'm not even going to try anymore. I'm just giving up. I don't care. Well, that's the wrong attitude, because this has already passed. Why are you letting it still continue to influence you? I remember a story of 2 Tibetan priests. They were, walking along, an old one and a young one. I've told you this before.
In our devotional.
And they came upon a stream, a rather rapid stream, and there was a young girl there trying to get across the stream, and she could not. So the old priest picked up the girl and carried her across the stream and set her down safely on the other side. And the 2 priests walk on, the young one and the older one, and they walked in silence for a long ways, a number of miles. And finally the young one just couldn't stand it anymore. He says, how come you broke all the father's rules? You're not supposed to have any relations with a girl. You're not supposed to touch them. You're not supposed to carry. And the old priest said, I set that girl down on the other side of the stream 3 miles back. It's you who are still carrying it. And that's what we do in life. And it's even worse if these events that happen that are bad are people. If these are people. This girl burned me, this guy burned me, this guy betrayed me, that boss fired me. Because then the hate is all the stronger, and you carry it with you, and what happens if you carry hate with you? It eats you up, and eventually you become the hater. And it's all because of something that's already past. It's done. It's over. So wisdom then becomes what? Well, it becomes to look back at the past for learning only. If it was negative, you learn what? Exactly. Don't do it again. Don't do it again. Well, it hurts when I go like that. Well, don't go like that. It's not brilliant. In a positive, you say, do it again, repeat it, but maybe enhance it some. I made a great pie. I never made a pie before. So I made a pie, and it was good, and it was delicious. Everybody liked it. Next time, I'm going to make 2 pies, for the church dinner or whatever. But if you make a pie, you take it to church, and it's terrible, and everybody says, Benny, your pie is terrible. Well, you can leave there hating everybody that hated your pie, or you can look back at this event and say, you know what? I'm not going to make a purple potato pie anymore. I'm carrying those purple potatoes, not just in my mind, in me. My life is never dull. Just when you think, oh, this day is boring, purple potato. Gotta love it. Anyway, so true wisdom then determines this right here. Because this will determine partly who you are. Now, let's throw God into this mix. What if you had a bad experience with God? Or a bad experience with God? Or a bad experience with God? Or a bad experience with God? Didn't get the job, didn't get the woman, didn't get the promotion, didn't get the whatever. Didn't get the healing. That happens a lot. People come to church because somebody's dying. They pray and they say, make God fix it. God doesn't fix it. What happens to them? You never see them again. They bail. And they hate God forever and ever. Hebrews says this quite plainly. They say that once you've tasted the good grace of God, His mercies, His compassion, once you've been filled with His Spirit, once you've lived in the light and the passion and the beauty of everything that is eternal, and then fall away from it, what happens? It's impossible to turn this guy back into a Christian, because now he himself, in his mind, crucifies God. He doesn't need anybody to help him crucify him. He's doing it himself. And we do that to people that we can see and that we live next door to, and we do that with the Lord. Rather than looking back and saying, okay, this didn't quite go the way I thought, but what can I learn from it? God didn't heal my mom. Maybe it's not about your mom. Do you ever think that? Maybe your mom's days had run out, just like God said, before you take your first breath, all your days are ordained. Not one to be added, not one to be denied. But, when that number's up, that number's up. So your mom was doing exactly what God had planned for her to do before she was born. Maybe this isn't about God, your mom dying. What's it about then? Maybe it's about you. Maybe it's about your brother or your sister who hadn't spoke to your mom in 20 years. Maybe God's got a bigger blessing here and you're too stupid to see it. So you're just going to walk forward hating God. And you call yourself a wise man? Well, a fool knows better than that. A fool can ride a horse just like a prince. He doesn't get the opportunity to all the time. But when it comes to being who he is, well, he has the same right of choice to be a positive fella and to learn and listen to the past, but to look forward to the future, or he can just let it color him to where he's a miserable sot just like everybody else on the planet. Now you see, this guy's wrestling with this issue down here. What's God done for him in the past? What's God not done for him in the past? But he's trying to figure it out. He's weighing this thing back and forth. We saw last week he took his first step on at least acknowledging the possibility of God. He took his first step with, if this is my path in life and I'm at a point of decision or critical decision, and there's two roads, which one am I going to take? Everybody goes, take the high road. But yet 90% of the people, I'm going to go say 97% of the people, will not take the high road. 3% will. Well, why? What's the difference between these two groups of people? Wisdom or folly. This road might be harder, steeper, more arduous. This road might just be a smooth sailing all the way down, especially if you have a skateboard. But what's the end result? Well, we've got a lake of fire down here. And we have the glories of all heaven up here. Which way do you want to go? Well, I want to go to heaven, but I want to travel on this road. Well, that road doesn't go to heaven. See, this is the difference. The road, the path, what was it? Frost? Didn't Frost write that? The path less taken?
Less travel.
Less travel. Or as the rock and rollers would say it, that's why there's a stairway to heaven and a highway to hell. Talks about future or anticipated volumes of people traveling on it. So this is what we're talking about in this whole thing. And if you look, he's arguing it back and forth. You can have the best perfumer's oil in the world, but if a dead fly gets into it, or two or three of them, what happens to it? Nobody's going to want to buy that. Kind of like if you have a big bowl of punch there and I'm selling it for 50 cents a cup and you guys walk up and there's flies dead in it or a couple of moths floating around in it or something. Are you gonna hand over 50 cents for a bowl of moth? No, you're not. Nobody in their right mind would do that. This is what he's trying to say. Wisdom then is not something reserved for the elite, for the overly educated. It's something that can be practiced by the slave and the prince, by the king and the fool. And everybody has that choice on a personal, individual perspective. You can be a wise woman or you can be a foolish woman. You can be a wise man or you can be a foolish man. Well, what determines that? Well, first of all, how you look at things. Second of all, how you assess things. And most importantly, how you let those things influence you. Now, if you try, I don't know. I saw a guy skiing down a hill, down a bunch of rocks. It was a rocky hill, on a hunk of board. He didn't have snow, he didn't have water, so he just go down there. And he was doing fine for a while, until he hit a bigger rock, and what happened? Well, off he went, and then he hit even a bigger rock. Bam! And he was all busted up. He says, "Oh, that was cool, man. I'm going to do that again." Really? Wisdom was lacking in that sense. I mean, it makes great television. You watch it, watch this guy, he's going to kill himself. But the smart man would look back at that and say, trying to ski on big giant boulders is kind of stupid. Water's a little better, because if you fall, what happens? Well, you get wet. Snow, almost as good as water. If you fall, what happens? You get snowed. It'll cushion you a little bit, maybe, unless you hit a tree, then that's a bummer. But rocks, come on. It's a great epitaph in every redneck. If you go to a redneck graveyard, almost every grave says the same thing. You know what it says? "Hey, y'all, watch this." Because it all ended the same. "Hey, y'all, watch this." Kind of like the coyote. Remember the Roadrunner and the coyote? No matter what that poor coyote tried to do, it was not going to work out. Well, this is where wisdom comes in. And you have the same allotted wisdom as do I, Barb. So do you, so do you, so do you, so do you, so do you. Everybody in here can make their own choices. You can assess the past, things that has happened to you specifically, personally. You can assess whether or not it's worth worrying about or even remembering. And you can finally assess how it will influence you. Then you will live to the consequence. You can do that in your personal life. Racha, last time when you went to the store and bought that red hair color, thinking I'll look like a red hot cucaracha, and she painted her hair red, and people kept throwing blankets over her trying to put the fire out. So she thinks about it, says, red might not be my color. Maybe I better go back to black. Purple. If I paint my hair red purple, people will think I'm a big bowl of mashed potatoes. But you can learn from it and say, red's just, whoa, not my color. Where was I? Oh, Gary and Carol came over Friday just to pick up Riker and take him back. And we went to the Greek restaurant. And there was a girl in the Greek restaurant serving who had a blue foundation on her head with purple hair and yellow stripes all through it. And I thought, I wouldn't have done that. Well, it's artistic, it's creative. Well, you got good eyes then, if that's how you see it. I see it as stupid, and a little more stupid. I mean, you can't take her seriously, really. She wants to apply for a business position or something. Hi, I'm here for... Yeah, okay. Barnum and Bailey is over in Tampa. You need to go over there. So that's what we're talking about. And all the way down, he explains this in every which way. So the question now becomes, how am I going to govern this? Because that's it. It is a personal deal. Remember, he's arguing whether or not God is of any viable aspect. He's been through this. You know, bad experience with God, bad experience with God. Everything he sees, bad experience with God. Where he is now is right here. He's assessing whether or not, as he looks back in this, whether or not he's correct in his assessment. Is this God stuff a waste of time? I've been here and sitting in church for 20 years. No miracles have really happened. Everything I prayed for, and, it comes true if I get out there and make it come true. I mean, where is God in all of this? Or you got guys that say, I've been sitting in church for 20 minutes. Everything I've prayed for has happened perfectly. You see what I'm saying? And I think that's kind of what the apostles went through. They thought, well, now that we believe in Jesus, everything's going to be a nice bed of roses. Quite the opposite. They were tormented, they were persecuted, they were hunted down, and they were killed one by one. And there was no bed of roses there, but they held fast to the end. Even John to the very end and said, Lord, we've given everything. You've given all. We got nothing left. Was it worth it or not? And, funny thing is, God shows up and says, let's talk, John. I got something I want to show you. Remember the promise Jesus made at the Last Supper? Truly I tell you that there's some of you here that will not die before you see the kingdom of God. Now, do you think those 12 meatheads in that room even knew what that meant? No. Those guys were fishermen. They were, zealots, professional guerrilla fighters. Judas was a crook. I mean, for crying out loud, those guys weren't, no, we're not going to die until we see the kingdom of God. Let's talk about that. They probably never gave it a second thought until John was dying on that island. And he said, Lord, was it good or bad? And God said, come with me, John. I don't think it ever crossed his mind. When Jesus said, some of you will not die before you see the kingdom of heaven. Pretty powerful stuff. There's too much to see waiting in front of you to spend much time on what has already been, is done, is finished, is over. Too much to see. True wisdom will point you in this direction. A false sense of wisdom will keep you looking back. This builds anger, this builds resentment, this builds hate, and hate is the death of any relationship, even with God. You got it? That's what Scripture says. Looking back builds disappointment. T-M-E-N-T, and I know there's only one S. It brings frustration. It builds anger. And it builds hate. And hate is death. And death is you. That's scriptural, folks. That's not Tom Chanter philosophy. That's right there in black and white. This is why Paul says, don't let the sun go down on your anger. Because you're one step away from hate. Actually, you're 2 steps away. I forgot one. Resentment, and then hate. And you say, Tom, is that really true? And I say, oh yeah. Resentment is where you play it over in your head over and over again. What you should have said, what you should have done, I should have told you. And I play it over and over again in my head too, and every time I do, I'm just chiseling it into concrete. You see? And pretty soon it's a huge memorial slab in my brain that says I gotta hate Barbara for the rest of her life. That's why Paul says, stop it right here. This is a tiny influence. This is an infection. This is an all blown out flu. Stop it right there, because this is hospitalization and this is the undertaker. Basically, do not let the sun go down on your anger. You got a problem? Deal with it right now, because eventually the only person it's going to kill is you. That's biblical. That's wisdom. And this is where Solomon, or Ecclesiastes, is right now. He's dealing with all of these issues, but he's dealing with all of those issues with God. Last week he acknowledged God. He acknowledged that, yeah, he's there, but he's too unapproachable. But if God did this and this and this and this, he must have been around, right? So your unapproachable argument goes out the window. And the fact that you are starting to hate him for it means that you're still in relation or contact with him, right? Think about it. Mr. or Mrs. Wisdom, think about it. Well, I ain't never going to talk to him again. Well, you kind of are now. I like the foot stomping thing. That was cute. But you are. You might be here. Worse, you might be here. But that unapproachable thing, that doesn't work for you anymore. He's obviously approached you. You didn't like it. And now you're returning the favor by hating him. What is that? That's communication. Not good communication, but it's communication. You might want to rethink this. Instead of looking back in anger, let's look back and what can I learn from this? How many of us do that? Nobody. How many of us fly off the handle? Everybody. How many of us even seek revenge? I'll get even. Everybody. How many walk on and say, well, you know what? I'm disappointed, but maybe I didn't belong in that position. Maybe I didn't belong with that girl. Maybe I didn't belong with that guy. You know, what's God doing here? Maybe I didn't deserve that job, or I wasn't skilled enough for that job. That's a better way to look at it. And if I'm not skilled enough, what can I do to get skilled? You know? What can I do? What kind of training can I take? And then maybe next time I'll be ready. That makes you a better person. But most importantly, you're like the fool. You're whistling through life, doing the best you can and enjoying everything that comes along. Even the bad stuff. All right? Well, this is the second step. The first step was the unapproachable God. The second step is, well, if he is approachable, how can I approach him? As a fool or as a prince? Well, God's not impressed with princes. He's not impressed with fools either. Is there a middle road somewhere? Is there a middle road? He's standing right here. Which way do I go? Toward God or toward the world? This is a trip of hate against all things. And this is a trip of, eventually, love. Well, it's like I tell everybody else. They go, well, why do you believe in Jesus Christ? All right, well, that's a good question. Why do I believe in Jesus Christ? Let's say this is me. And let's say this is me. And here, Tom Chanter is a Christian. I try to live by the rules of the Lord. Love, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, all that good stuff, and that little thing we adults like to call self-control. I make lots of good friends. I have lots of good buddies, and the people that are ugly against me, well, I just let that pass. And if I can't heal the relationship, then I just tend to stay away from them. But nevertheless, I live a pretty good life, right? Nice and wonderful. Okay, here's Tom Chanter, who's not a Christian. Okay? I don't give a dang about anybody. Everything, everyone needs to be manipulated, coerced, connived, or beaten, flat out beaten up. As long as I get what I want, then that's good. These are the people who think the guy with the dies with the most toys win. The end justifies the means. In other words, I can do anything I have to anybody I want to get what I want. I'm a mean, nasty kind of guy. No, very few friends, if any. And nobody trusts me. I spend my life looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next, shoe to drop. This is a life of peace and kindness and love and fellowship and, chicken dinners with purple potatoes and all that stuff together, my friends. This is a life of just, I got to keep my eyes open at all times. No peace of mind, no peace of heart, no peace, period. All right, we get down to the end of the life, what happens? Let's say there's no God, there's no heaven, there's no Jesus, there's no nothing. Where does that leave me? Well, we're both in the same boat, right? We both go into the great nothingness. Whatever the nothingness is. We just cease to be. But what if there is a God, and there is a Jesus, and there is a heaven, and all that stuff we've read about? What happens then? Well, this Tom is going to go enjoy it all. This Tom is not. So let me ask you a question for the Christian Tom, because that's what we're talking about. Why do you go to church and all that stuff? Well, it looks like it's a no-lose situation, doesn't it? If there is none of that, then I go into the nothingness, whatever that is. But if there is, this guy's in a lot of trouble. You know what I call that kind of thinking? Wisdom. Surely if I said, give me all your money, I'm going to invest it for you on a stock that may return a gajillion dollars. But it only has about a 3% chance of hitting. Would you do it? Be honest, nobody would do it. Nobody would do it. It's got a 97% chance of failing miserably. That's pretty impressive. Well, let's put that over here to our life choices. The way that leads to hell, said Jesus, is smooth and heavily traveled. The way that leads to heaven is sparsely populated. Very few on the road. So why do you go to church? Why do you put up with all this God stuff? I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to go with the no-lose. I'm going to go with the no-lose. But that's what this guy's wrestling with in this chapter. And we all have the same power and the same right to make those decisions. I'm going to remind you again, Jimmy Buffett. Yesterday's over my shoulder. I won't be looking back for too long. There's too much to see waiting in front of me. And I know with Jesus, I'll never steer wrong. I'm going to go with the no-lose situation. Now, Ecclesiastes here hadn't made that decision yet. You'll have to wait till next Sunday. But he's getting close. His first step was maybe this God is approachable by virtue of his own existence. Well, if he is approachable, then how do I approach him? How do I make it different? How do I make me different? Well, this is why we call it the wisdom literature. Right now, he's on this track. And God is the object of his dissatisfaction. Hopefully, he can learn maybe God's not the problem. Maybe it's me. All right? That's a decision every Christian will make at one time or many times in their life. If you read Psalm 119, the pilgrim there in that journey comes to this exercise, if you will, 3 distinct times in his life. As a young man, as a middle-aged gentleman, and eventually as a very old senior. While he's dying, he's still asking, Lord, am I resenting you or am I still hating you? And he says, you know, if that's true, then help me. Remove this anger from my heart so that I can be welcomed into your kingdom. 3 times throughout his life, he has to take this kind of spiritual inventory to see if he's still on the right path to approach the Lord. How many Christians do that today? None. How many are even aware that they need to do it? None. You know, women, you all have mammograms all the time, don't you? Of course you do. Why? You had one years ago, isn't that enough? Stuff changes. Gentlemen, we have colonoscopies all the time. Why? We had one when we were young. Isn't that enough? No, stuff changes all the time. And that's with this simple little physical self. If that's true about our physical self, how much more about our spiritual self do we need to pay attention and to be alert? All right? Next week we'll see what he does with it. This week he's just assessing it. Next week we'll see some decision making. All right? That's all I got. Go away.